Genesis chapter 21 tells us a powerful story. It's a story about promises, miracles, and challenges. We see God's faithfulness to Abraham and Sarah. They welcome their long-awaited son Isaac. This birth is a miracle. It reminds us that God keeps his promises no matter how long it takes. Abraham and Sarah had waited many years for a son. God promised them a son, but they were old. It seemed impossible. However, God was faithful. He brought laughter to their home with the birth of Isaac. Isaac's arrival brought great joy. It was a testament to God's power. He can do the impossible. The birth of Isaac is a symbol of hope. It reminds us that God's timing is perfect. This story encourages us. God keeps his promises. We can trust in him even when we don't understand. God is faithful and will fulfill his purposes for our lives. Isaac's birth brought joy and laughter, but it also brought unexpected challenges. These challenges tested Abraham's faith. They remind us that even miracles come with complexities. Hagar, Sarah's servant, also had a son, Ishmael. He was older than Isaac. Sarah felt jealous of Ishmael. She saw him as a threat to her son, Isaac. This jealousy led to conflict within Abraham's family. Abraham was caught in the middle. He loved both his sons. He struggled with what to do. God told Abraham to listen to Sarah. He promised to take care of Hagar and Ishmael. This part of the story is difficult. It reminds us that life is complicated. Sometimes miracles come with pain and difficult decisions. We must trust in God's guidance even when it's hard. Abraham sent Hagar and Ishmael away. They wandered in the desert of Beersheba. They were alone and scared. Hagar became desperate, thinking her son would die. The desert represents a place of testing and uncertainty. Hagar and Ishmael faced the harsh realities of survival. They had little food and water. Their situation seemed hopeless. This part of the story is heartbreaking. It reminds us that life can be unfair. Sometimes innocent people suffer, but even in the darkest moments, God sees and hears our cries. Hagar cried out to God in her despair. She felt alone and abandoned, but God heard her cries. He saw her suffering and responded with compassion. God sent an angel to Hagar. The angel comforted her. He promised her that God would make Ishmael a great nation. God opened Hagar's eyes to a well of water. This miracle saved their lives. This encounter reminds us that God cares for the marginalized. He hears the cries of the marginalized and the oppressed. He is a God of compassion and mercy. He provides for those in need. Trusting in God's promises, even when they seem impossible. God's promise to Abraham seemed impossible. He and Sarah were too old to have children, yet God kept his promise. This teaches us about the importance of trusting in God's promises. We may face situations that seem impossible, but we must remember that nothing is impossible for God. He is faithful to his word. He will fulfill his promises in his time. Trusting in God's promises requires faith. It means believing even when we don't see the solution. It means holding on to hope even in the midst of uncertainty. God honors our faith. He rewards those who diligently seek him. Obedience in the face of uncertainty, Abraham's test of faith. God asked Abraham to sacrifice Isaac. This was a difficult command. It tested Abraham's faith in ways he never imagined. However, Abraham obeyed. He trusted God's plan even when it didn't make sense. Abraham's obedience teaches us about surrender. It's about trusting in God's will, even when we don't understand. It's about letting go of our own desires and following God's guidance. Obedience isn't always easy. It can require sacrifice and tough choices, but God honors our obedience. He blesses those who are faithful to his commands. God's care for the outcast, a timeless message. The story of Hagar and Ishmael highlights God's care for the outcast. They were outcasts, alone in the desert. However, God saw them. He heard their cries and provided for their needs. This message is timeless. It applies to us today. God cares for the poor, the oppressed, and the forgotten. He calls us to show compassion and love to those in need. We are called to be the hands and feet of God in the world. We can make a difference in the lives of others by showing kindness, offering help, and speaking up for those who cannot speak for themselves. Finding hope and relevance, Genesis 21 in our lives. Genesis 21 is more than an old story. It has valuable lessons for us today. It teaches us about God's faithfulness, the importance of obedience, and his care for those in need. We can find hope knowing that God keeps his promises. He is faithful even when we are not. We can find strength knowing He cares for the marginalized and the oppressed. He sees our struggles and hears our cries. Genesis 21 challenges us to live our faith. It calls us to trust in God, obey His commands, and show compassion to others. It reminds us that God is working in our lives, even when we don't see it.